What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Secret Studios podcast. We are reading in 19, Chapter 7, Happy Train. Here we go. On September 15th, 2027, Pepper, age 15, woke up suddenly and a little startled, but gained her composure. Then she was greeted by her little fluffy black kitten, Nix, at the foot of her bed. Pepper's phone was to the right of him, and her headphones. She had forgotten to put them up before she went to bed the night before. Pepper looked to the left of her room, at the door of her bathroom, then pulled her covers off and got up, holding on to Nix. She let him down on the floor. Next, she walked to the bathroom, opened the door, and walked in. Later on, she came out of the bathroom and walked over to a trunk at the foot of her bed. She pulled out 2 pairs of pajamas. One pair was a pale pink dress that a friend gave her. The other was a black hoodie sweater with a random multicolored printed polka dot and pants that matched. She put the dress back into the trunk and took the hoodie and pants into the bathroom. After she got dressed, she was looking in the mirror and brushing her short black hair that cuts off just below her chin. She adjusted her big black hoodie sweater that was in fact so much bigger than her that it gave the appearance as if she were surrounded by a small black cloud with little multicolored lights inside. She walked out of the bathroom and into her room, then walked out of her room, down a short hallway, and into the landing of the stairs. She walked down the stairs carefully, holding on to the rail, and at the bottom of the stairs was a large open living room and kitchen. The kitchen was to the right, and her living room to the left. She stayed at the bottom of the stairs. Her mom, Eleonora, was rinsing out a cup, and her dad, Chang, was cutting up vegetables for a slumber party Pepper and her parents would be attending that day. Her parents are professional chefs who had taken it upon themselves to make lunch for all of Pepper's coworkers, especially since some of them didn't have parents to cook for them, such as Lisa and Bobby, every week. They are making all of the food for the party, while other people did things such as decorating, organizing, shopping, and baking. They were listening to music as they cooked, and Eleonora's favorite song came on. She turned up the radio and began to sway slightly to the music. Chang started to tap his feet on the floor. The song started out as a simple, calm maraca song. As Pepper was watching, the beat started to pick up. Chang sliced a whole onion into tiny little pieces. He then went over to the stove, using the cutting knife, slid the onion pieces into a large pot that was cooking. Then threw the cutting knife into the air, spun around, and grabbed Eleonora, who was already waiting for him to turn around. She then grabbed his hands, and they began dancing down the narrow space in between the island and the counter. Pepper was not surprised by this and watched in anticipation at her professional circus performers while the cutting knife landed into the sink. This was just before they made it back down to where they were before. Eleonora trying to catch her breath while her and Pepper were giggling slightly. Pepper said, it's just a fun dance competition. There aren't even any prizes. The dance competition Pepper was talking about was a group competition that was going to be at the museum as part of the slumber party. It was true there weren't even prizes, except for stickers with a print that made them look as if they were prize ribbons. Nonetheless, her parents didn't even care about winning, but loved the thought of people being surprised about how good they've gotten. At the same time that Pepper and Eleanor were talking, Chang was looking in some cabinets behind them. He said, "Has anyone seen the decorative plates? The big one with all the leaves on it? I was going to use it for the nachos." Eleonora said, in response to his question, "I think it's up in the attic." Pepper said, "I'll get it," and then walked away. At that moment, they were finishing up a tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwich recipe. It was Sunny's favorite, and a nacho recipe, River's favorite. They are the twins whose birthdays are today, and the reason for the slumber party. Chang and Eleonora also made potato soup for other people who did not like or were allergic to the other options. Pepper's parents were getting everything ready to take the food over for the party. It was starting in an hour, and Chang was getting all the dishes ready to go. A few minutes later, Pepper was up in the attic, reading the box labels to find which one was the decorative fall plates. She found it under a box labeled Important Information. She didn't see the box on top and pulled the decorative fall plates box out, causing the box labeled important information to fall over. When she saw the box had fallen over, she looked at her phone, which she was using as a flashlight. She looked at the time and found that if she picked it up, she would be late for work, so she decided to pick it up later. She was always good at remembering to do a chore later. She came back downstairs and gave the plate to her dad. She then grabbed the brown paper bag that her mom was handing to her. Pepper said, "Thanks." Eleanor asked, "What was the sound upstairs in the attic?" Chapter 8 of in19, New Train of Thought. "I knocked over a cardboard box filled with papers," Pepper said to her mom. Then she assured her mom that she was going to clean it up when she got back the next morning. Her mom agreed that that was okay because she knew Pepper was good at making sure she did what she said she would. She also rarely needed reminders to do her chores. Pepper then held on tightly to the brown paper bag and walked outside to the city bus. There she saw her friend Lisa, who seemed sad. Pepper sat next to her in the back of the bus. Pepper's mom walked up to the attic to clean up the mess so that Pepper didn't have to. She went over to the knocked over box of papers and began to tear up a little. These papers were signed, as were other important documents. She looked at her phone and decided that there was enough time to look through Ifyou. She took them downstairs. Chang was drying off his hands after washing the dishes that were in the decorative fall plate box and putting the dishes needed in a box to take to the party. Eleanor said, "Chang, look at these." Chang took one look at the box and tilted his head with a smirk. He came over to the box. Eleanor picked up the paper on top. It was a list of legal information for Pepper's adoption. The adoptive parents, of course, are Chang and Eleanor. Chang and Eleanor talked about and remembered the events leading up to her adoption. They got married on September 14th, 2010. They both loved the idea of a big family, but soon after some testing, they found out they couldn't have children due to a health problem. Later on, Bella and Ethan, who were best friends of theirs, texted them and told them that Bella was going into labor. Eleanor and Chang had offered to watch Cody. Their daughter was 4 years old at the time, so they picked Cody up. Hours later, Ethan asked Eleanor and Chang to bring Cody to the hospital to see their newborn babies. Taylor and David are twin boys, but when they got there, they weren't able to see the babies because they had severe heart problems. The twins were born 3 months early and had to be rushed to surgery. After the surgery, they would be put in the ICU. So instead, Chang and Eleanor comforted Ethan and Bella. Hours after, a nurse came in and said both twins had successfully made it through the surgery, but they would need to stay, and explained some things about the ICU and some other things. Ethan and Bella breathed a sigh of relief. The nurse went over some information with Ethan and Bella about the twins and then left later. Ethan said, "Who says that parenting isn't exciting?" Then Bella turned to Chang and Eleanor and said, "So when do you guys plan on starting your own family?" With a bright smile, believing that Eleanor and Chang are dropping hints on social media about a possible baby announcement. They were hoping that they could know before everybody else. Eleanor said, "We can't have kids," with a sad tone in her voice. And a nurse came in with Bella's food and then left. While Bella was eating her food, they continued to talk. After hours of talking, it was almost time to leave, and Cody was getting tired anyways. So, Eleanor, Chang, and Cody were fixing to leave. But before that, Bella said, "Have you ever thought about adopting?" Chang and Eleanor looked at each other, surprised that neither one had thought of this before. Then Eleanor said, "God closed one door and opened another." Eleanor and Chang were sad that they couldn't have children naturally. They're always very good at seeing the bright side. They went through the long and hard process of adopting for 1 whole year. They had some fallout. They worked hard at their little restaurant. They ran a restaurant called Casa Orito and put money back. They later used to buy a big house with a lot of bedrooms so they could take in a lot of children. They even got certified for fostering. Towards the 1-year mark, they adopted a little 1-year-old girl named Taylor. But even as a 1-year-old, she had a strong attitude that eventually led her to getting the nickname Pepper. And then after, she was forever known as Pepper. Eleanor and Chang still worked hard and brought in a couple of temporary foster kids who usually left within a month. Chapter 9. The anticipation of the train ride. 4 years went by, and they found other kids that they were going to adopt. The oldest was 2 years old, and her name was Chloe. And the youngest was 1 year old, and her name was Zoe. Years went by, and more temporary foster kids came in and out, 29 to be exact. There were usually only less than 3 foster kids in the house at once. But Chang and Eleanor were still looking for more kids to add to their family, but were unsuccessful until years later. Chang and Eleanor decided to take a trip with their 3 girls, Pepper, who was now 14, Chloe, who was now 12, and Zoe, who was 11, because their favorite authors were signing books at a mall out of town, and Chloe and Zoe had asked if they could go, so they were going to take a train ride. Why they took a train instead of flying? Because they always wanted to be on a train because their favorite book series, Inverted, partnered with that specific train, so the train owners decorated every car to look like scenes from the book. And this trip was all about doing fun stuff the girls wanted to do, so they packed their suitcases and put them in their 15-passenger hot pink van. The girls picked out the color. The girls were excited to go. They got into the second row of the van while Chang and Eleonora put the luggage in the back. Chang then walked to the driver's side and opened the door. Then he got in his seat and shut the door. He told the girls to buckle up. Eleonora then opened the passenger side door and sat down. Then Eleonora shut her door. Eleonora and Chang then reached up, pulled down, and fastened their seatbelts. Eleanor then said in a cheerful voice, "Ready?" All 3 of the girls said, "Yes." Another reason they were going was because there was a group of kids that were up for adoption whose parents had died recently, and they had no other place to go because the old orphanage exploded due to a reactor made completely out of tiny TNT molecules and lots of radioactive liquid. The thought of having new siblings made Pepper, Chloe, and Zoe excited. They could barely stand the excitement of meeting their new siblings and having them forever. Their parents warned them, saying it was a possibility that they weren't going to come because, after all, they might not want to, and it was their decision, as there were a few families who were trying to adopt this group of kids. There were 6 kids. Eleanor read off the list of names and ages, even though the whole family already knew all the names, just to build up even more excitement. Starting from the oldest, there was Jack, age 14, Joseph, age 13, Brandon, age 12, Layla, age 11, Kara, age 6, and James, age 5 days old. It was hard to tell who was more excited about the new family members between the girls and the parents. Eleanor and Chang had to focus on the road, so the girls read a book named Inverted. The Mystery at the Clock Tower was written by their favorite author, whom they were going to meet. A little while later, they got to the train station. Then they parked their van at the train station parking lot. It would only take 5 hours to get where they were going. They left the house at 8:23 a.m. and arrived at the train station at 9 o'clock and would be arriving at their destination at 2 o'clock. They would have to take all the kids' luggage back with them, so they packed very lightly. As they were getting on the train, they were excited to see Mr. and Mrs. Twist, the authors of Inverted, on their way to their room. They pointed out little Easter eggs that were set up across the train. When they got into their room, they decided to read Inverted, The Mystery at the Clock Tower, some more, even though they had already read it several times. 2 hours later, they got on talking about how life would be with their new siblings, wondering what room they would choose that they had set up months in advance. Chapter 10, Train of Pain. After an hour of talking, Zoe and Chloe were getting hungry. Zoe said, "I'm hungry. Can we get something to eat?" Chloe and Pepper both said, "Me too." at the same time. And then laughing, Chloe said, "Can we go to the dining car there?" Eleanor said, "It's only 11. The dining car won't be open until noon, but there's a snack cabin nearby. You guys stay here, and we'll go get a snack." "What are everybody's orders?" Eleanor said. Pepper just wanted some chips, and Chloe and Zoe both wanted chocolate bars. Eleanor and Chang both got out of their seats. Chang said, "Remember the rules. I'll text you to open the door." This was because the door did not have a window, so they could not see who it was. To be safe, Chang took his phone, and Eleanor left her phone there in the train car. Eleanor opened the door to the room and walked out into the hallway. Chang then walked out, shut the door behind them, and began walking down the hall to the right of the car. The reason Chloe, Zoe, and Pepper didn't come with them was because of a friend of theirs who takes train rides on the very same train with their kids, and oftentimes it was overnight to visit her parents, who lived in the same city where the book signing was taking place. They asked her for advice, and she told them, number one, the train was bumping around, and during that certain time, she had a few of her little kids who had fallen over on the bumpy train, which was usually most bumpy between 10:30 and 11. The second was that kids were not allowed in the snack cabin. This was because the snack cabin was complimentary, and they worried that the kids would take more than they needed. The friend also recommended that they take this exact car because it had a snack cabin to the right of the room. Right next to it, and opposite to the snack cabin, was a restroom. But instead of that car, they got a room right next to the caboose, and there was just a restroom and 4 rooms, 3 on the opposite side of their room and 1 on the left, and all of them were empty. This was because many people used this train with their whole families, and this was the one car that did not have a snack cabin and has been deemed unsafe for kids under a certain age to stay in that car because the door lock on that car that leads to the outside of the train was broken and they would possibly fall out. The door had been taped up in yellow tape to show warning, and the tape was not strong enough to keep somebody from falling out. But the door was being fixed at the last station where there were parts. Eleanor and Chang remembered that their friend had also mentioned that there was a room to be in. It was the one that was on the opposite side of the dining car. This was especially a problem because the dining car was closed and there was no other way to get to the other side. And the caboose was filled with people who often didn't like noise, were often there because of business, and had no children with them. They already had to deal with complaints from these people. They did not notice this as they were walking to their room because they were talking to the train conductor, who was an old friend of theirs. The conductor had said not to go near the broken door, but they thought this was a general instruction just in case they wanted to explore the train. A little bit later, a janitor in the dining car who was getting it ready for service saw Eleanor and Chang and let them in before he mopped the floor. He said that he would go to the conductor to see if they could get a better room. So they all left the dining car and went into the room that they were supposed to request. They thanked the janitor and began getting snacks. Over in the business car caboose, 2 men were watching through the window. One of them said to the other, "The boss only wants the 2 younger girls." The other one replied, "Okay." In the other train car, Pepper got up to the door and turned back, telling the girls she's going to the restroom and do not unlock the door unless she texts her mother's phone, which her mother had left there for Chloe and Zoe and Pepper, just for the reason that Pepper had her phone, so she was going to text her mom's phone in the hands of Chloe and Zoe so that they knew she was at the door. She left the room, not before she told her dad to let him know that she was going to the restroom, but as she was walking to the bathroom, she felt unease, like she was being watched. She turned around quickly to see a door with a round window, but no one was there. She thought it was just nerves from all the new things happening in her life soon. The two men were watching as Pepper went into the bathroom and decided that this would be the time to strike. They exited their car and knocked on the door. Pepper just came out. Meanwhile, Chloe checked the phone and saw no text from Pepper, but she saw a text from her dad saying that he was at the door, so they decided to answer it. What they didn't know was that text was from a couple of hours ago. When they quickly realized it wasn't their dad, they tried to shut the door. The two men were too strong for them. They pushed open the door and grabbed the girls, covering their mouths so they couldn't scream. Then one of them grabbed a glowing ball-looking thing and crushed it in his hand. The light grew and then they disappeared. A couple of seconds later, Pepper comes out of the restroom and realizes the door is open.
Hey guys, this episode had to be split into 2 parts. Part 2 is coming as soon as we can get it edited. Thanks for watching. Bye.
She also saw her sisters sitting on the floor in front of their beds. She was also young.